Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to BusinessLine podcasts. I'm your host, TR Vivek. Yesterday, Kumar Mangalam Birla, the chairman of Aditya Birla Group, resigned as the non-executive chairman of the telecom company Voda-Idea. Voda-Idea, of course, was formed when the two beleaguered, debt-ridden telecom operators, Birla's Idea and UK's Vodafone, merged. Um, and now he's willing to, Birla is willing to offer or give up his stake in the debt-ridden telecom company. Birla owns around 27% in Voda Idea and Vodafone about 44%. Kumar Birla's resignation perhaps marks the end of the group's tumultuous and painful two-decade-long adventure in India's telecom. Things are so bad at Voda Idea that Birla is offering to give up his stake to the government and wants, and there are several analysts who are advocating that the government should buy up Voda Idea. The plight of his partner Vodafone is perhaps even worse. Vodafone has lost nearly 12 to 14 billion dollars in India, and it perhaps seems a cunning Indian plan to extract partial reparations from the UK for the plunders of the East India Company. Uh, Voda Idea's travails are perhaps emblematic of the mess in the Indian telecom sector itself. India, of course, was once the most coveted telecom market in the world with more than a billion users. What went so horribly wrong for everyone, with the exception of one or two in Indian telecom? To discuss this mess, I'm joined by Thomas K. Thomas, Business Line's bureau chief in Mumbai and an ace telecom reporter himself, who's covered the sector for nearly 2 decades. Hello, Thomas. Welcome to BL Podcast.
Hi, Vivek. Great to be here once again.
Thomas, is this the end of the road for Voda Idea and Birla Group in Indian telecom?
Okay, yeah. So that's a billion-dollar question, which everybody's sort of wanting an answer to, whether this is the end of the road for the Birlas and end of the road for Vodafone Idea. So let me just put that into perspective from the point of view of where the industry is today, right? So if you look at the industry today, we have three private players, which is uh, Reliance, Jio, Airtel, Vodafone Idea, and of course the public sector company BSNL. Uh, at one point in time, when Vodafone and Idea had merged, clearly the two companies, when they merged, they were the largest in terms of the subscriber base, right? But soon Jio came in and sort of swept the market away through smart tariffing. They brought in new services, features, right? Until then, most of the stuff that is what's being offered by the telecom operators, they were going after the low-hanging fruit, which was basically offering very basic voice-based telephony, right? So it's only when Jio came into the market, people started talking about 4G and data and things like that. And after 2016, we are seeing that players like Airtel have also moved up that value chain from just offering simple basic voice services to a whole lot of things, right? So in that context, what had happened is that there was a time period around 2016, 2017 when Vodafone and Idea at that time and Airtel were doing reasonably well. They had the market with them. Most of the other operators had, sort of either died down or shut down operations. 2G scam had happened, so a lot of licenses were, had to be scrapped. So essentially, it was Idea, Vodafone, and Bharti who were running the show as far as telecom is concerned. Right about around 2016-17, there was a decision that needed to be taken on 4G. Whether 4G should be invested into, should we buy spectrum, should there be a rollout, and all that. Jio came in, and I think that both Vodafone and Idea sort of misread that market at that point in time. And if you look at the auction that happened around that time, neither Vodafone or Idea acquired much of 4G spectrum. Most of the 4G spectrum was acquired by Jio and Airtel. So that is sort of a miss, if I may put it that way, on the part of Vodafone Idea. And in technology, you blink and you miss, right? We've had so many brands who've lost out of the technology race because they've missed out on certain technology cycles. So by the time they realize that 4G is something which is here and now, and in those days, executives in Vodafone Idea used to talk about 4G as if something was going to happen in the 2020s. 23 it will come, 24 will come. It was happening right in front of them. So they missed that bus. And by the time the investments came in, by the time Jio had taken away the market, Airtel had invested. They acquired a lot of Tata's business. So they got in 4G like that. So that is a crucial element into the whole thing. So people, a lot of commentators say it's the government's fault, like AGR happened, and policy issues were there. Yes, all of those were right. And as you rightly pointed out in your opening remarks, that telecom is a story of completely, short-term bad policy making. But is Vodafone completely out of this? No, they also have to take some, blame out of this. Now, coming to your question on, what is the future for them, right? So here is a situation where both the existing promoters, which is Birla Group and Vodafone PLC, have said they are not going to invest any more equity, right? So telecom is a highly capital-intensive business. You can't say I am not going to pump in money, right? When you have Airtel and Jio pumping in billions of dollars, rolling out new networks, acquiring subscribers, and 5G is coming up next year. So you'll need fresh investments coming in, right? So you are sitting on a debt pile of 1.8 lakh crores, right? You owe government almost 1.2 lakh crores, of which some of these payments are coming up as early as next year. You don't have any plan to pump in fresh equity for fresh rollout, fresh acquisition of spectrum, right? So if you look at the totality of that in the current circumstances, it looks very difficult. The road looks, very, very sort of, I would say the end of the road for them. So but if the government, so the ball is here in now the government's court, because there are, as I said, there are some policy tweaks that the government can do, which we can talk about in detail. But if those things come in, and if Vodafone Idea is able to improve its cash flows, then what could happen is that some other investor may be interested to run the show, because if with enough cash flows and the policy is favorable, somebody else might say, look, I'm willing to pump in the equity and buy the shares of say Birla or Vodafone, or Birla or Vodafone themselves might say, okay, maybe things look better now, I can run the show, right? But it all depends on from here on how the government is going to respond to this.
Thomas, before we delve deeper into the present and the future of the business, for younger listeners, give us a flashback of the origins of this entity, which was quite unique in those days. Which was formed as an alliance, almost a menage a trois, between the two most prominent faces of Indian corporate sector and a global telecom giant in AT&T.
Yeah, so even before that, this whole idea of getting into telecom space was actually taken by Kumar Mangalam Birla's father, and I think it was one of his last decisions he took before he passed away in 1994-95, I think. And then Kumar Mangalam Birla took over the reins when he was just 28 years old, and at that point in time, this company was known as Sterling Communication, and they formed a company called Birla Communications. They acquired Sterling Communications from Shiva Sankaran Group. So that's how it started. Way back in '94 when the first licenses were given out, and there was the AT&T deal, and then the Tata came. Tata also had a telecom mobile business at that time, so they all merged, and they came to be known as Batata in the early 1990s. Late 1990s, early 2000s, right? Mm-hmm. From there, around 2001 is when the government decided they are going to issue out, so until then we just had 3 mobile operators per circle. So licenses are given circle-wise, like so Delhi is one circle, Maharashtra is one circle, Tamil Nadu is one circle. So every circle had 3 operators. So the government then said, okay, we need to bring more competition. So let's bring in a 4th cellular operator. So they invited bids, and there was an auction which was carried out in the 2001 time frame, and that's when really the Birla Group's telecom venture really took shape, because that's the time when they got a lot of these 4th cellular license across the country. So pretty much from being like a 3-circle, 4-circle operator, they become more pan India in around 2001 time frame, right? And that's also the time when Idea Cellular as a concept as an idea came about. So because Birla said that we want to run the whole show on itself, and AT&T was struggling back home in the US, and AT&T decided they want to exit some of the known non-core geographies, right? So they moved out of India. Tata's decided they want to go on their own. So if you remember, there was this whole thing about CDMA technology which came in, right? So that was being led by Dhirubhai Ambani in those days and Mukesh Ambani. So Tata said, let's throw our weight behind that technology and get our own licenses. So then there was a conflict between Birla Group and Tata on how can you have two conflicting businesses, you are running on your own and you're also invested here. So Tata has exited out of that. So it became just Birla, completely controlled by Birla. There was a Malaysian investor which came in, small minority stake, and the Idea Cellular brand was formed. So if you look at that, from then on, that business was pretty good. So from 2002, 2003 onwards, despite the challenge which came from CDMA, they pretty much did fairly well. They understood the 2G market very well. Voice was, something which they knew how to do it. And along with Airtel, they pretty much took control of the market all the way till this Geo thing came in 2016. Okay, so I think that's why I said there was a miss of how they sort of understood or misunderstood the market dynamics changing. So up until then, they were doing fairly well, right? So Himanshu Kapania used to run, who's now been brought back as the as a man to lead after Birla has stepped down. He was leading as the CEO of Idea Cellular then. And if you look at the quarterly numbers which they used to put on, they used to come up with pretty decent profit numbers. So it was running very well. Vodafone also was independently, so again they also go back to went through various iteration of mergers, acquisition. It was earlier known as SR, then it became Orange because Hutchison came in, right? Then Vodafone acquired Hutchison, became Vodafone SR. Then SR got out of this, became Vodafone India, and then so if you look at the journey of Idea Cellular and Vodafone independently up till 2016, 2017, no issues. They were doing fairly well in all the markets that they're working on, and they had pretty much good control of the 2G market. 3G also came around 2010. They were pretty decent with that. So 2016 is where the turning point happened, and that's where the things started going wrong.
Thomas, is telecom a case of the Indian government killing the golden goose? Except one operator, this seems to be a graveyard for all manner of players, from the Tatas to Birlas to global majors. It can't be the case that all of them were incompetent, right? So, this seems to be a case of the government willfully, destroying a sector that was built and which had huge potential over 2.5 decades.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. So this entire telecom saga. So people ask, is telecom a success story or not? Consumers are getting the lowest tariffs. Look at our data rates and all that. But my argument is, if you go to another country like the US or Japan or or Korea, you will see what you're missing out on as a consumer, right? They are like 5, 6, 7, 10 years ahead of us in terms of services that we have. So the rot started way back in '94 when they decided to open the market, right? So the government then said, we will do an auction for a license, and companies like HFCL, which was run by Mahendra Nahata then and even now, quoted this astronomical amount, like 10,000 crore for a license. Those days, 10,000 crore in those days would be worth several lakh crores in today's value. And they went ahead with that, and then the operators went back and said, oh, we can't pay this, bail us out, right? So what does the government do? They say, in '99, they said that we'll go to a revenue share arrangement. So instead of collecting fee upfront, you start paying me a revenue share, right? So revenue share happened. Everybody hailed as a great, policy because it brought down the tariffs and so on and so forth and all that. So yes, it did all of that. But in a way, you were legitimizing a wrong which was done in '94 through this formula that you came in with 1999. Okay, so that happened. '99, it happened. People accepted it, went on. 2001, again, what happened? By that time, Dhirubhai Ambani, who was missing out on the telecom action, started thinking of getting into telecom, right? And those days, it was, as I said, there were only 3 operators allowed. So how do you get into this space? So he came up with this whole theme of CDMA technology. Let's bring in a new like an operation or a technology called CDMA technology. And they said that this is going to be a poor man's phone. That was an argument given, because in those days GSM technology was predominant, and the operators used to charge 8 rupees, 16 rupees per minute, and the hand phones used to be extremely expensive. So Reliance came and said that we will break this down, give us this technology, and we will make sure that we will massify this whole thing. So they said, we will not do full-fledged mobile, we will do a limited mobility kind of a thing. So government bought into that argument and gave this spectrum to them, saying that you do limited mobility. The limited mobility became full mobility, and that became another, mad fight between the GSM camp and CDMA camp. Did Reliance manage to do what they said? Did it democratize voice calls and broad tariff? Yes, it did. Did you see rickshawalas going around with those white Reliance phones? Yes.
500 rupee, 501 phones.
501 phones, it did happen, but at what cost, right? I mean, so you tweak policy in such a way that you allowed a new player to meet your objective, but was it done in a way which sort of would satisfy all your governance issues, right? Then it went to a huge, legal, controversy, and then finally the government again cobbled up a compromise formula where they convinced the GSM operators to withdraw all the legal cases and got Reliance to pay an entry fee to get that license. In those days, you could get a mobile license by paying 1,650 crores. So Reliance paid that money upfront and converted their entire, legitimized. So another case of legitimizing, a policy which was done without thinking, and then they legitimized this. So you have these instances of policy making. Come to 2008. So from 2003, the patch-up happened, peacetime. So 2003, 2008, peacetime. There was not much happening. Reliance was rolling out their CDMA, and Airtel, Vodafone, and Idea respectively with GSM. 2008 is when the next big thing happens, when A. Raja famously announced, I'm going to further open up this market, right? And say, I'm going to bring in more competition into the whole thing, which is a good idea. But the way he did it, which you all know how he did it, I mean, he suddenly on one day he decided that today is the last date for paying bank guarantees and all that. And I was there in DOT, and I could see people queuing up, and then he said this is going to be first come first serve. So whoever applies the first gets the license. So to be the first, there was a queue, right? And by the way, he had already informed certain people, operators, that this is going to be the day when I'm going to announce it, right? So all the people who were already in the know were already inside the Department of Telecom with the bank guarantees required to get a license, whereas everybody else was standing in the queue. So that was the scam. I mean, much has been written about it, so I don't want to get into that. 2G scam happened, but I'm just saying that was another flawed policy that happened. Because of that, what happened? You brought in a lot of players. Competition happened. Yes, good. A lot of investments came in. Telenor came in. Russia's MTS came in. But 2 years later, the Supreme Court, decided there was a scam, and they scrapped all the licenses, right? So all those billions of investments that you brought in, infrastructure that you created, employment that had happened, everything gone in one shot, right? And who's to be blamed? Who's to be blamed for all of this, right? It is the government's bad policy making, right? So repeatedly you see this. Yeah.
Thomas, to cut to the present, there have been some suggestions by analysts, which I think are preposterous, that the government should buy out Voda-Idea and run it. Given the government's track record, shambolic record of running BSNL to the ground, do you think it makes any sense for government to bail out Voda-Idea at this stage and just fritter away the taxpayers' money?
Yeah, so should the government bail out Vodafone Idea? My answer is yes. Should the government bail out by taking ownership of Vodafone Idea? My answer is no. But there are other ways to do it. I mean, in terms of policy and all that. And I'll tell you why it is a bad idea to take ownership. And as you rightly pointed out, there are two reasons. One is government itself is trying to exit a lot of these business. I mean, the disinvestment is happening. Air India trying to get out. BPCL is happening. So government itself has decided they want to get out of these, core infrastructure businesses. So when they have decided that, then how can they take on another project? That's one. Number two, they already have two PSUs, telecom PSUs in their kitty. and they're struggling, right? And we know the case why it is struggling: mismanagement, political interference. They've not been allowed to, expand and buy equipment. So all of that is known, right? So with all of that knowledge, how do you make that decision that I'm going to take this over and make it into another, nationalized company? Doesn't make sense at all for me. And just for the heck of, creating a thing that, okay, another operator is also in the market, just to say that, I don't think this is a good way of doing it, right? But there are other ways. I mean, there are other ways of policy making which can help Vodafone Idea to serve. I wouldn't say survive, because survival is something which is immediate, right? So what can you do to make the operator thrive? So instead of survival, can you think of thrival, right? So let's look at those kind of policies, right? Not
But
these immediate short.
what would those be? What would those be? Just thinking about, should the government then waive off the AGR dues that the companies owe them, which run into
No, I
billions
don't.
of dollars?
No, I don't think you should waive it off, because see, there are these. This has revenue implications for the government also, right? So if they are supposed to get whatever money from license fee, revenue share, or spectrum fee, see, typically government gets about 40 to 50,000 crores a year from telecom services, right? So there are ways. I mean, can you then say that, find a formula where I say that as a government, this is what I need from the industry. I need 40,000 crores from the industry, right? On a yearly basis. So how do I get that? So right now, how they do it is that they have something called as license fee, which is around 8% of the revenues that you make every year. On top of it, if that you have something called a spectrum usage charges, which is about 4 to 6%. And then so these are two ways they have. So, and then you have all the income tax and all of the taxes. So typically, a telecom operator pays about 30% of its revenues to the government, right? So can you rationalize this in a way that your income doesn't get impacted, but at the same time you don't penalize an operator who's making good revenue? So right now, if I'm making excellent revenues, I have to pay a fraction of that to the government, 8% fixed, right? If I'm making 100 rupees, I have to pay 8 rupees. If I'm making 1,000 rupees, I have to pay 80. So why like that? So I am saying, let the government say that this is what I need. So 40,000 crores is what I need, and to get that money, what is the license fee that I would need to charge you this year? So every year, let it be flexible. So that's one. Number two is this whole idea of AGR. So they have to pay this 50,000 crore or whatever second. So give them. So you already give them a 1-year moratorium, which ends in like March 31st next year. So can you give another 1 year, extended by another 1 year moratorium? You give them. The third thing that they can do is this whole idea of AGR. Let me just spend 2 minutes in explaining this.
Sure.
And this is important. It is because the definition of AGR, according to the operators, is that I will pay you revenue share from the revenue that I earn from telecom services. So because I am using spectrum, which is a natural resource which you are giving me. So whatever revenue I'm getting from telecom, I give you a revenue share. Fair enough. What the government is saying is that is not enough. I want revenue share from all your revenues, which means if X operator is keeping a sort of a kitty in a bank, and that he is earning an interest on that, the government is saying I want revenue share on that also. To me, that is a little unfair, because if an operator is making money from some other ways, why should the government be interested in that part of the revenue, right? You've given the operator to perform telecom licenses, you've given them spectrum to do telecom services, so you take revenue from that. So I think the government should clarify that once and for all. It cannot do it retrospectively. I don't know if it can do with
Then we are dealing with a Supreme Court judgment here, So it is.
Yeah. So that. Yeah. So that is. So you. Yeah. So that is what I'm saying. We cannot do it retrospectively because the Supreme Court judgment is there, but it is a policy decision which the government can take for the future, right? You can say that from here on, this is what the policy is, right? Because the Supreme Court has ruled on a decision which the DOT is taken in 2003 and said that what DOT has decided in 2003 is correct. That whatever policy that they had decided is correct. The government can now say, I'm changing my policy. There should not be any issue with as a legislator or as an executive, the power of policy making lies with the executive, right? The court cannot intervene there. So that's another, thing that they can do.
Thomas, the proponents of a government takeover of Vodafone Idea, they say that it is in the interest of not allowing a duopoly in the market. How valid are such concerns? Is duopoly indeed so bad? And given the AGR judgment, which has implications on Airtel's balance sheet as well. So, given that, are we then looking at a monopoly? Given the pressures it will create for Airtel and its ability to have a significant war chest to invest in, say, 5G technology in the future. So, what are the implications for the telecom sector in general and for us as consumers? Are we looking at a monopoly?
Yeah. So, firstly, your first question, is duopoly such a bad thing, right? So, if you look at other sectors where you have ports, airports, for example, airports. Right now, Adani is pretty much controlling, a significant part of that infrastructure. You look at other brands also in the market. You have clear, market players and brands which are dominant players, and then there are these fringe players. So, is duopoly such a bad thing or not? So, in the telecom space, the worry is that if you don't have more than two operators, they could jack up the tariffs. That is the bottom line of this fear, that if you don't have more, the competition levels will, decrease, and therefore the operators will be free to fix up a higher tariff. No, but the thing is that is already happening. If you look at what Airtel has done last week, and so if you look at the tariff announcements over the last year or so, right, tariff increases already happening. So there is some merit to that question, whether duopoly is such a bad thing or not, and why not just have two players and let them, two strong players, and let them run the show, and why even save Vodafone Idea? I mean, that's a valid question, which needs some detailed analysis of whether, because in the telecom space, we've never had a situation where there are less than 3 or 4 operators. We always had 3, 4. In mid 2000s, it was 10 operators, 12 operators. It's only now we have come to a situation where you have one very strong player, one reasonably strong, and then 2 weak players, right? So we need to see how this plays out. But personally, I feel, I think the market is so huge. We are talking about a billion population. We are, at 600 million internet connections. There's 400 million more to go. There is rural connectivity to be done. I think in that context, it makes sense to have a third player in the ecosystem, right? Because the market is so huge. If you were a smaller country, maybe 2 was enough. Look at China, right? But China is all government control. China is all government control. They don't have any private players, and these 2 companies have, taken up the entire market. So, can you do something like this here? I don't think so. Personally, I am in favor of having competition alive in this market. About your question about Airtel, so I think Airtel is a slightly better position compared to Vodafone Idea, and they played it smart. And I think the credit goes here for Sunil Mittal, who's essentially a telecom man, right? I mean, he doesn't do anything, has not dabbled in any other business. He has dabbled in retail, but he didn't do well. So he stuck to telecom. See, he understands this business inside out, right? So the value proposition is for the Airtel is that, currently they are pretty much even Stevens if you look at the numbers with Jio, both in terms of market share of revenue, market share of subscribers, right? They are coming back into profit numbers are coming back. Their payout to government is not as high as Vodafone, maybe I think 40 or 50% of Vodafone Idea.
Yeah.
And they've understood the game. They've invested into 4G, they're getting into services. They've partnered with a lot of players like Netflix and so on and so forth. So they are playing it pretty smart. And as I said, the market is too huge. They know that. And, and the good thing is because they're an early entrant into the market, the higher end of the market is with them, right? So if you look at the higher end ARPU, postpaid subscribers is with Airtel and some with Vodafone Idea. Jio is getting into that, the predominantly prepaid kind of customers, right? So Airtel knows that they've got the premium customers in Bombay, Delhi, metro circles and all that. So I think they are pretty much, in a nice sweet spot of, if you look at that, and the kind of potential which I talked about, 1 billion population, data deluge is happening, consumption is going skyrocketing, right? So if they are able to weather this out for the next 6 months to 12 months, which I think they will be able to do it, then it's pretty much, great market to be in as far as telecom is concerned. So it's a matter of survival for a lot of players. If you survive this out, and once you are ready with 5G next year, and if you're there at that point in time, then the market is open for you, right? So it's from here to then, who's going to survive, who's not going to survive is the question. In that context, Vodafone Idea is struggling because, as I said, 1.8 crore debt payouts going to happen, no equity coming in, strategy they've fallen behind. So when you look at all of that thing, Vodafone Idea looks pretty much in trouble.
Thomas, thank you very much for joining us today. And until we meet next time, goodbye and God bless.
Thank you, Vivek. Great chatting with you.
Hey, thanks, man. Thank you. That was great.
Yeah, no one. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Okay.